All right, James, if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, would you rather take on Spencer Rattler or Derek Carr?
I mean, 6 of one, half dozen of the other with the potential return of Kalijah Cansey and Antoine Winfield Jr.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, football fans, and welcome into this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Bucs and Locked On Saints. We are your hosts, James Yarko of Locked On Bucs, myself, Ross Jackson, over at Locked On Saints. On this crossover Thursday episode, we're going to break down the critical matchup in the trenches and what each team needs to do to get a win on Sunday as they try to stay alive in the NFC South. We'll take a look at Baker Mayfield, who just looks to keep shining and stay dangerous. And we're going to look at Spencer Rattler, announced as the New Orleans Saints quarterback, and how that changes this game almost entirely. We appreciate you very much for being here, for being an everydayer on Locked On Bucs or Locked On Saints, proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and we appreciate you making us your first listen. This crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Bucs, Locked On Saints, brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. James, usually when we do this, we start with the away team, we go offense, defense, home team, offense, defense. But man, when there's big news like this, there's only one right place to start, and that's with the quarterback, right? So I want to first get your thoughts on this. Spencer Rattler named the New Orleans Saints starting quarterback. Derek Carr dealing with that oblique injury, going to be out for, quote, multiple weeks. We expect at least 2 games. What do you feel? What do you think when you hear that news when it comes to that Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense?
I mean, I'm really not surprised at all that Rattler's getting the call. He's got to take the field at some point, right? And this is a guy that the Saints believe in. He was pretty good in the preseason. And when I take a look at Rattler, as far as how it compares to the Buccaneers defense, I look at who the Bucs are likely to get back. Kalijah Cansey, full participant in practice on Wednesday. Antoine Winfield Jr., a limited participant. Both are trending to play this weekend. And I think it opens up so much for this defense, a defense that struggled a lot last week against the Atlanta Falcons. They couldn't, get any pressure. They couldn't defend the middle of the field. Well, Kalijah Cansey there with Vita Vea and Logan Hall on the defensive line, that opens things up for those guys and the edge rushers. So you're going to start to see more pressure. Antoine Winfield Jr., he's the do-it-all guy and do it all at an elite level in this Todd Bowles defense. So when it comes to Rattler, who I think is a far more impressive athlete than Derek Carr, he can buy time with his legs. He can fit passes into extremely tight windows. He's got great touch on the deep ball, but Todd Bowles can now take his first real NFL experience and mess with his head a little bit. Nobody disguises things the way Todd Bowles does. And now that he's looking to have a full allotment of his players on the defensive side, it really changes how he can disguise things and get after Spencer Rattler. And, pardon the pun, I have to say it, Rattler early on in the game, with the pressures and the disguises and the different looks that he bring.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this is a game that, like, if you're a Saints fan, you're really excited to see Spencer Rattler, but boy, you sure would feel a lot better if Eric McCoy was your starting center. You know what I mean? And things like that. And so, like, I'm with you 100%. I get, like, from the defensive standpoint that they're kind of going to come into this maybe licking their chops a little bit, being able to go against somebody who has no regular season NFL experience yet. But I think the Saints are going to be maybe a little bit, how teams sometimes get like that little bit of a 1-game boost from either right after they fire their head coach or right after a new quarterback starts, stuff like that. Those two things could potentially come to a head for sure. But Spencer Rattler, make no doubt about it, is going to be tested in this game. Having Antoine Winfield back, who can prowl the middle of the field, having those guys back on the defensive interior. Logan Hall was a menace last week up against the Atlanta Falcons. He's like one of my favorite players in the division to watch, all that. Saints fans get mad when I talk nice about opposing teams' players. But look, players are good, even if you don't like the teams, okay? But when it comes to Rattler, I think the thing that he brings to this team that changes this matchup for the New Orleans Saints is that now they can force Tampa to play 11 on 11 in a way that they haven't been able to do since going with Derek Carr, right? Like the last time that they really were able to do the 11-on-11 thing was when they went to Taysom Hill for a few games, and then immediately they ran away from that, maybe a little bit sooner than they should have. But I think that that's the element that gets added to this game is his mobility, his escapability, his dual threatness, which gives you the ability to be able to throw in some of those designed runs, stuff like that. So I'm really interested to watch what the chess match is going to be between Todd Bowles and his defense, and then now Clint Kubiak, who has put together a really good offensive system, but now gets to add like another element maybe to it, a little bit of a wrinkle, if you will, James, to it. So I'm excited to kind of watch the battle of these two coordinators with the addition of Spencer Rattler involved.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned kind of that dual threat element, and you take a look at the first Bucs loss this season against Bo Nix, and he's not really that dual threat. He did, have a couple of decent plays running the ball, and I think the loss there was more about Sean Payton out scheming Todd Bowles, as he tends to, unless it's the divisional round of the playoffs, and what Bo Nix did himself. You take a look at
why you got to bring up old stuff, man?
Because I got to. You take a look at the first week of the season when the Bucs faced a rookie dual threat quarterback, and they're the only ones to contain Jaden Daniels this year.
Right.
So I think it's going to be kind of a similar approach in this one, where you might let Rattler get his on the ground. Jaden Daniels finished with 88 rushing yards and I think 2 rushing touchdowns in that game, but couldn't throw the ball. He couldn't move the ball down the field with his arm. And ultimately, that's where Tampa was really able to stall some Washington drives, and the defense was able to get off the field. So it's not going to surprise me at all. Like I said, with the addition of Cansey, with the addition of Winfield, if they kind of, let Rattler run a little bit, but really shut down the passing game and hopefully not let Rashid Shaheed have another 65-yard touchdown catch like he's had every week this year, except the week I started him in fantasy.
Always the case, isn't it?
Every time.
Yeah. My observation from that is the thing that might work in the Saints' favor then is if Clint Kubiak's able to out-scheme Todd Bowles in the passing game, right? To where if you're able to be in a situation to where, Spencer Rattler gives you a little bit of production, I wouldn't say you're looking for Spencer Rattler to give you 80 plus yards, but I'd say if you get, 30, 40 yards from Spencer Rattler on the ground, running, getting out of trouble, extending some plays, maybe extending some drives, which I'm going to talk about here in a second, that if they're going to give him that, then he can take that. And then it would be up to Clint Kubiak to create sort of that scheme that matches up passing game wise up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that's going to be big to watch in this one. I mentioned I was going to come back to the idea of extending drives. I think this is one of the new things, one of the other things that Rattler gives you that we haven't seen from the Saints in a while is that when they go into those third down situations and they face a lot of pressure, you saw Derek Carr just chuck it like all Monday night up against Kansas City when he was in those situations. I don't know if Rattler does that. I wonder if Rattler instead utilizes his speed and escapability, and then all of a sudden those 3rd and 8s become first downs. That's where I think Spencer Rattler can really, really change things when it comes to this matchup.
Yeah, and
if he can do that. If he can do that, let me be clear about that. If he can do that,
right? Well, and he has the capability. There's no doubt about it. And I think that's where you're going to see exactly what the Bucs did against Philly, and that's going to be Levante David territory, where he's going to be the guy that kind of stays home and it is able to prevent that 3rd and 8 from becoming a first down. It becomes a 4-yard scramble instead of a 10 or 11-yard scramble. Yeah. And, I think there's going to be a lot of situations where KJ Britt in those situations won't even be on the field. So, the Bucs might err more on the side of caution in terms of coverage by taking KJ Britt off and bringing on a Christian Izien or a Tyke Smith because of how vulnerable they were over the middle of the field. So that would kind of leave Levante on a little bit of an island. But again, that's where Antoine Winfield Jr. comes in. Yeah. Jordan Whitehead can play that center field position. Antoine, he can be a thumper too. So he can kind of come up and be some relief for Levante if that's the direction the Bucs go in.
Boom. Yeah, this is going to be such a fun chess match, man. It's going to be so much fun. You get the unknown involved in it and everything like that. And it's just one of those things that reinvigorates you when you get to watch some fun football. So we'll see how this all goes from that perspective. Now we're going to take a look at the Bucs offense up against the New Orleans Saints defense, because while the Saints have a new quarterback in town, Tampa Bay Buccaneers have a really, really good looking Baker Mayfield in town so far this season. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Bucs and Locked On Saints here on this crossover Thursday, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints and Locked On Bucs is crossover Thursday, brought to you by friends over at Z-Biotic. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic that was invented by PhD scientists to kind of help you in those morning after situations when maybe you've gone a little bit hard the night before. It's effectively a pre-alcohol drink, and you'll notice the difference the next day. Even after a great night out, you can confidently plan on getting to work the next morning, recording a podcast the next morning. All you have to do is drink the pre-alcohol, then drink responsibly, and then enjoy tomorrow. So go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off of your first order when you use the promo code LockedOnNFL at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee. If you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund you your money and no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use that promo code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. Today's episode also brought to you by friends over at Game Time, the best place to get your tickets, whether you're planning months in advance or moments in advance. Right now, the New Orleans Saints hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You can get tickets for under $100 on Game Time. And if you're like me and you love procrastinating, it might actually work in your favor, because typically when it comes to Game Time, prices go down as the event gets closer. And that event could be sports, it could be a concert, like music, it could be comedy, theater, and so much more, all available for you over at Game Time. My recommendation is to toggle on all-in pricing. That way you get the transparent experience of not having any surprise fees by the time that you get to checkout. You also see seat views, so you know exactly the view from your seat before you purchase those tickets. So go and check them out today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Well, it's game time. All right, everybody, continuing on with this crossover Thursday edition. My good friend James Yarko over at Locked On Bucs and myself, Ross Jackson, over at Locked On Saints, here breaking down this Sunday matchup between the New Orleans Saints and Tampa Bay Buccaneers that just gets more interesting by the minute, James. Let's take a look over with the Bucs offense. They got a quarterback that's playing lights out right now. Tell us a little bit about what you see from that Tampa Bay offense.
Baker has been outstanding. He's top 10 in the league in passing yards, top 3 in completion percentage, second in touchdowns behind Joe Burrow, who had a 5-touchdown week against the Ravens. So it's like, all right, whatever.
What you really doing over there, Joe?
Third in quarterback rating behind Flacco and Joe Burrow. And does Flacco's really count? He's played like 1.5 games, and one of them was against Jacksonville. So that's like, that doesn't count either.
Right.
2 interceptions on the season. So his touchdown to interception ratio is 5.5 to 1. And my biggest thing is against the Falcons, they let their foot off the gas in the second half. Baker, back-to-back weeks, at least 3 touchdowns in the first half. Then against the Falcons in the second half, they got just 2 field goals. And of 26 rushing attempts that the team had in the game, 17 of them came in the second half. Why weren't you letting Baker bake? He and Cohen have really clicked, and they've been on fire. And for whatever reason, they played not to lose rather than play to win. And it bit them. It cost them against a division opponent in a game that they should have won. So the Bucs offense really goes as Baker and Cohen go, and Baker's made really, really smart decisions. He's one of the best in the NFL at pre-snap reads, and they've been putting themselves in positions to take advantage of different mismatches and opportunities, and it's showing. Like the faith and the belief that the Bucs showed in Baker is paying back tenfold.
Yeah, man. And look, don't forget Baker and Liam Cohen. Like, they gave us one of the best storylines a couple of years ago with Baker showing up in Los Angeles on a Tuesday, having to play on a Thursday. That was Cohen as the OC there, helping out, making sure that all that happened. Or quarterback's coach. Can't remember which position he held, but
he was coordinator.
He was coordinator. Let's see. I need to trust my instincts, trust my memory. Yeah, man, he's had a nice week and nice season so far. And look, the Saints are coming off of a week to where their defense didn't look like they typically look. The Saints went very zone heavy up against the Kansas City Chiefs over on the defensive side of the football. And you wonder if that's just something that you're doing because you're trying to keep eyes in the backfield because it's Patrick Mahomes and all the things that he can do. Some good that did him. But I don't know. Like, I don't know if you really want to play a heavy zone approach up against Baker Mayfield, right? You want to be plastered to those receivers and things like that, because then you got to make the receivers beat you. If you play zone, Baker's going to beat you all day long. And so I don't think that the Saints can replicate that. They got to get back to their sort of man-heavy approach, which isn't majority man, right? They still play a lot of zone, but they dropped at least like 10, 15 percentage points in terms of their average zone usage or man usage, for their starting corners. Not the way that they typically go. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this matchup because the Saints have a lot to prove over the defensive side. And to me, this is one of those things where if the Saints defense can stand up to this Tampa Bay offense and do it for 4 quarters, which has been the big issue for them, they've been doing it for like 3, but doing it for 4 quarters, that has to be something that speaks positively around where the New Orleans Saints defense is headed, because this isn't the Cleveland Browns Baker Mayfield. This isn't some castaway Baker Mayfield. Like, this is Baker looking as good as he's looked in his entire career. New Orleans is going to be tasked with showing that they can stop it. And I think that Dennis Allen, especially after coming up short on the defensive side up against Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes last week, here's an opportunity for him to prove something.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, this isn't a game where New Orleans can go zone heavy like they did on Monday night. If they do, Chris Godwin is going to go for $170 and probably 2 touchdowns.
Juju went for 130. Juju.
Yeah, and he can't catch. Like, and we're talking about Chris Godwin, who has probably the best hands in the NFL. When you got Tom Brady saying that those are the best hands he's ever thrown to ever, that's saying something. And
he ain't have a lot of good receivers to throw to like that. That was Tom being Tom. I mean, he had Randy for a little bit. Don't get me wrong, but
you say he got Randy. And let's be fair.
I think Julian Edelman some credit. Yeah.
Edelman had some great hands. Wes Welker had some great hands.
So I always forget about Wes Welker. I stand corrected.
Right,
That's good company. That's good company.
Yeah. So yeah, if they're going heavy zone, it's going to be Chris Godwin out of the slot all day long. Mike is going to get his opportunities on the outside, up the sideline, and he's been really good, especially the past couple of weeks. First ballot Hall of Famer. Say what you will about the Evans-Lattimore rivalry, which Evans talked about with the media on Wednesday, but Mike Evans is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's
not a lot of guys in the NFL do what he does, man. Like on a season by season basis, like that's insane.
And then you're looking at probably the return of Jalen McMillan, who has made some really good plays in his own right as a 3rd round rookie out of Washington. So if they go the same direction that they went against Kansas City, maybe to keep eyes on the backfield because Baker's been a dual threat, maybe because they're concerned about the pass catching of Rashad and Bucky Irving out of the backfield, those receivers are going to have a field day.
Yeah, Saints second level, it's a little banged up right now. No Pete Werner. Willie Gay Jr. had a procedure on his hand. He was out there today, or on Wednesday, but he wasn't participating in practice. So you got to rely on Demario Davis for those running backs and tight ends out the backfield. I'm excited to see Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans. I don't know what it is, James, but I feel like this is going to be an all-timer between those two. And an all-timer for 4 quarters, not 2 quarters until they get kicked off the field. An all-timer between the two of them. I'm excited to see them go back and forth. You mentioned Mike Evans as a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think anybody's going to talk about Marshawn Lattimore that way, but he would love for people to talk about him that way. And I think here's a game where he gets an opportunity to maybe step up and show that, because he's been outstanding this season when he's been on the field. He was the only cornerback that didn't give up a catch last week. Alontae Taylor in the slot has been one of the Saints' 3 best players in the all season so far. So I'm excited to see some of those matchups. Big thing I'm going to be watching for is if Paulson Adebo can keep the laundry off the field. That's been a big thing for him here over the course of the last little bit. He's got 7 total, either defensive pass interference or defensive holding penalties so far this year. He's got to be able to keep all of that off, but they're going to be tested big time. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Jalen McMillan, like these guys, it's going to be a fun matchup to watch these corners go up against those receivers. Coming up next, James, because we're going to be able to keep this conversation going a little bit as we take a look at the biggest things that each team needs to do to get a win in this matchup. But we are going to start in a different place, and that's going to be in the trenches, because one thing that Tampa's doing, New Orleans definitely isn't. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with this crossover Thursday edition here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode, this crossover Thursday, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now in this game between the New Orleans Saints, who will be hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Saints are home underdogs by 3.5 points. Now, I want you to think about this, all right? Because typically the home team gets 3 points. So that effectively tells you that FanDuel looks at the New Orleans Saints as like a touchdown underdog in this game in spirit. And so I think the New Orleans Saints have a big statement that they need to make. But look, this is a must-win game between both of these teams. That over-under right now set at 41.5. Might take the over, if I'm being honest, because I think these two teams are going to be in a little bit of a shootout when it comes to this, because they're trying to get that dub. So if you want to get a dub yourself, you can head over to FanDuel to get that done. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet as a new customer. Just head over to FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, breaking down this New Orleans Saints hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers matchup. Take a look at what each team needs to do to get that win. I want to start off over with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because Tampa Bay Buccaneers are doing something New Orleans Saints are not doing, and that's getting healthier. And James, I imagine that plays a big role for this Tampa team.
Absolutely. And you talked, earlier about Logan Hall and kind of the way he's played the last couple of weeks. He's matched over the last 2 weeks his career total coming into the season in sacks. He has been on another level. So, I mean, I don't know if that speaks to how poorly he played the first 2 years of his career or how great he's playing right now. I'm going to glass half full it and say it's because he's playing so great right now. But now you have the trend of Kalijah Kancey likely returning. The Bucs have not had him all season. You can go back to last year. And the damage that Kalijah Kancey and Vita Vea do when they are on the field together is massive. You add the additional pass rush threat of Logan Hall now as an emerging player, and all of a sudden things are opening up for Yaya Diaby, for Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, for the rookie Chris Braswell. The Bucs are going to be able to bring more than the Saints are going to be able to block. And if they get Antoine Winfield Jr. back, as well as anyone, that guy can get in the backfield. He can take down quarterbacks. He can disrupt rushing attacks. He can do it all. So having those two guys back on the field, if it happens, again, it's trending in that direction. It's not official yet, but that changes everything that Todd Bowles can do defensively and how much he can just absolutely toy with the brain of Spencer Rattler in his first career start.
Yeah, I think it's going to be huge. That brings me to one of my keys that kind of matches up with this, is that the Saints have not gotten healthier on the offensive line, right? Wednesday's practice participation report was estimated, but still no Cesar Ruiz. Eric McCoy's an injured reserve, so he ain't coming back. And then, of course, you now have Lucas Patrick, who's dealing with a chest injury as well. So that's the Saints' 3 starting interior offensive linemen that might not be, or at least one of them's not playing, right? Eric McCoy is not playing. So we'll see where things go when it comes to Patrick as well as Ruiz, but the Saints absolutely need those guys. And so the key for me in this exchange is that the Saints have to find a way to protect their young quarterback, right? To be able to give them, I don't know if it's, keeping the tight ends back, keeping the running backs back, whatever, but the more that you do that, the more your run game suffers, all these other things. And so one of the best ways that the Saints are going to be looking to alleviate some of the pressure on Spencer Rattler is by getting their run game going. Not going to be easy. Not going to be easy, because we just talked about those offensive line injuries, right? We can't say that that's bad for the passing game, but that it's somehow great for the run game. No, it's not going to be easy at all. So the Saints are going to have to scheme it, right? They're going to have to get this right in terms of deploying their outside zone run, getting their blocks right, getting players where they need to get, and then hoping that you've got Alvin Kamara, who was also estimated as did not participate in practice, along with Taysom Hill, who was out last week. And the Saints have struggled to keep their offense moving without a Taysom Hill in the lineup. So you want that run game to support Spencer Rattler to help to alleviate some of the pressure that James is talking about with that sort of potentially healthier defensive pass rush there. And of course, expansive pass rush with Todd Bowles. So that would be my top key that goes right along with yours, dude.
Yeah, no doubt. And trying to block Vita Vea with 3 backup interior offensive linemen, that is nightmare fuel for Spencer Rattler. Absolute nightmare fuel. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be the biggest key for both teams, right?
Yeah.
Then you take a look at what else Tampa needs to do. I would say first and foremost, get Godwin going early and then protect the middle of the field. That is not something that they did against the Atlanta Falcons. So the offense has been at its best this season when Chris Godwin has gotten the majority of the targets and the receptions, because no team can match up with him one-on-one in the slot. He's taken advantage of that all year long and been the Bucs engine. I love that they got Mike Evans involved in the game early the last 2 weeks. First passing play, both games, straight to Mike Evans. You know, he's come away with a couple of touchdowns the last couple of weeks, but don't forget about Chris Godwin in the process and what he does for the team. He's a third down, automatic third down machine. He's as sure-handed a receiver as you're going to find, and he's the guy that's moved the chains all year long. You don't have to get cute with the offense. Just get Godwin the ball, get inside the 10 zone, and then you can throw up a jump ball to Mike Evans. You can run it with Bucky. You can find Kate Otten, but Godwin has to be the guy to keep the ball moving up and down the field.
Yeah. Man, yeah, this is going to be such a fun game to watch. I'm like giddy. I'm excited about this. I haven't been excited about a Saints and Bucs game like this in a little while, probably since like Jameis's first game against the Bucs, right? Like, and then we saw how that ended up going with the injury and stuff like that, which is really unfortunate. But like, that was like the last time that you were really excited for a matchup like this, I think. Even I might be fading something, I don't know, but like it's just the way that I feel with this one. But I'm excited.
The one in week 17 last year that was a must win for both. Like New Orleans had to keep their playoff hopes alive with a road win, and the Bucs could have clinched the division. So that one had some serious stakes to it, and I think we were both I think I was a little bit more excited than you were, because you felt like New Orleans was trending down at the time, and then they gave you the hope that got a big win. But I mean, this is going to be a big one, because again, it's a must win for both teams, and we're saying that in week 6.
Yeah. All right. So my last two it's great. My last two keys for this one, before I keep nerding out, come down to the Saints taking away the middle of the field. That's been a big issue for them so far this year. And then I kind of conflated my other two in terms of protecting Spencer Rattler and getting the run game going. So I'll add a third one here, and that's get Chris Olave involved in going in this game. You were mentioning about Chris Godwin and how clutch he's been on third downs and things like that. Chris Olave's been the same way when he's been a part of the game plan, or when he has been taken out of the game plan. And so I think you got to find ways to get Chris Olave involved. You want Spencer Rattler, who can make all of these throws all around the field, to have somebody that he can rely on. And Chris Olave should be that guy. Like, that should be your number one guy going out there and getting it done. So I think that would be big. But when it comes down to taking away the middle of the field, I just think that that's something that the Saints have struggled to do over the course of this season so far in the passing game. We know the matchup between Marshall Lattimore and Mike Evans is going to be mostly a perimeter matchup, but they will get mixed up in the middle of the field, of course. Lattimore has covered Mike Evans over the 12 games that they played over 61% of the time. So I'm sure we're going to see a lot of opportunity and matchup between these two. But I think even beyond just that headliner of a matchup, you've got to see this New Orleans Saints defense find a way to not get torn apart by crossing routes, not get torn apart over the middle of the field, get back to what the defense was looking like earlier on in the season. Could be a tall task, but I think that that's something that New Orleans Saints have to get done. They finished as a negative EPA defense for the first time in a while up against Kansas City, but that was Kansas City. You can't let that happen again against a team that's not Kansas City. I don't care that it's the Bucs, but you got to not do it against a team that's not Kansas City. You know what I mean? So I think those are my two biggest keys here. Two other keys, get Chris Olave involved, and then start to fare a little bit better against those crossing routes on defense.
Yeah, and if I'm Todd Bowles and if I'm a Bucs fan, I want to see Zion McCollum be the one on Chris Olave for the majority of this game. McCollum is one of the surprise stories, I think, that's not being talked about across the NFL. He's Pro Football Focus #1 rated corner in the league through the first 5 weeks of the season, and he has emerged as just an absolute shutdown guy. I don't trust Jamel Dean right now. I don't want him on Chris Olave. So put McCollum over there and let him handle Olave for the vast majority. Olave's going to get his. It's McCollum can't be a stone wall forever, but the damage will be far less than if you have Jamel Dean being the one trying to contain Chris Olave. And you nailed it. Same with the Bucs. Cover the middle of the field. They didn't do it against Atlanta. KJ Brandt was just absolutely made to look like a fool by Kirk Cousins. And the last time these two teams, not Kirktober. Stop with the Kirktober. It's not a thing. You go back to week 17 last year, Juwan Johnson, 90 yards and a touchdown on 8 receptions. Huge. He absolutely exploded. You can't let that happen. What's a quarterback's best friend, Ross? A pass-catching running back and a sure-handed tight end that can sit down in the middle of the field to help him get out of trouble. You can't let that happen. You got to protect that interior, and that's why I talked about KJ Brandt in these passing situations might see the sideline in favor of a Tyke Smith or a Christian Izzian and somebody who's a little bit better in coverage to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned that being a quarterback's best friend. You know what? It's even more so a rookie quarterback's best friend, right? To have that sort of safety valve there. So one of the things that New Orleans has struggled to do is get Chris Olave involved in a game and get tight ends involved in the same game. It's always been one or the other. So it'll be to their advantage, it sounds like, to get both of those elements going if they can. James, this was excellent. I'm so excited for this matchup. I cannot wait. And of course, you and I get to do it again to close out the season. If you want more on the Bucs, James has you covered every single Monday through Friday. Of course, I'll have a Friday episode coming up talking more about this matchup to kind of close the tie the bow on what we're going to see here. Same thing over at Locked On Saints. We'll go into our game plan episode on Friday to get you ready. And don't forget the squad shows are on the way as well, which James got to participate in. Lots of fun for that as well. So good trash talk, some good fun, breaking down everything going on around the NFC. So you'll see that on both Locked On Bucs and Locked On Saints as well. We appreciate you very much for being here with us and for making us a part of your day, for making us your first listen, and for being everydayers here on Locked On Bucs and Locked On Saints. We'll see you again here soon on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.